We can speak to Ian Duncan-Smith, former Cabinet Minister and MP for Chingford and Woodford Green. Hello, welcome to the programme.
Hi there.
What do you make of what Mark Carney's had to say?
Well, I haven't had a chance to get through much in detail, but I don't see much different from the last set of forecasts they produced about this, or for that matter, much in terms of the earlier forecast that the Treasury put out. What we don't see from any of these is what are the assumptions they make, and particularly in the Treasury forecast. There's no essence of saying what were the assumptions they made about various elements, which are really important because the assumptions dictate what your outcomes are. And the second point I'd simply make is also about these things. I mean, these things are taken with a very fistful of salt because, only last year, the OBR, which is the ones that make the forecasts for the independent forecasts for the government to decide on how they alter their economy, admitted that they'd got their forecast wrong within 6 months of their forecasts for that year. And so had to change their forecasts within 6 months of their original ones. And my point, therefore, is that all forecasts, as the head of the OBR said, are ultimately wrong. Therefore, too much strain by that, I have to say.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying about that. I mean, having covered the budget in detail every year, then often the first thing the Chancellor does is re-correlate the forecast that went before. But are you saying that the general public who will listen to this and think, blimey, house prices are going to drop by a third, for example, are you saying they should disregard this warning?
Yes, I think they should, and I think it's quite important that if you look at what the Governor of the Bank of England said as a health warning on his own forecast, he said, I don't say these things will happen, I simply say these things might happen. And the reality is it depends, as I said, and this is the key element, there is a dynamic factor in all of this which simply cannot be modelled, and that is how do people, businesses, etc., react to the changes that take place. Do they take advantage of certain things? Do they not? I'll give you a good example. When New Zealand did a free trade deal, an enormous free trade deal with China, when they were negotiating it, they were warned by the forecasters, their own financial forecasters, that they wouldn't see any return worth talking about, or the returns in the matter of single percentages would not be seen from this within 10 years. Their returns on this, the growth levels that increased, were actually seen within 3 to 6 months of the deal being signed, which was completely against what the forecasters said they would be. And that's because people took immediate advantage and changed what they did. And that's my point all along with these forecasts. They are as though things were static. In other words, nothing changes. And the one bit that the bank and the Treasury always, I think, have got wrong, which is they're still modelling on what they call the gravity model. They place far too much emphasis on the geographic location now of countries trading with each other. And that has changed dramatically, given that 80% of our economy relies now on services, including financial services, which are not bound massively on geographical connection.
Isn't the real difficulty for the average person, and by the way, I class myself as that average person when it comes to considering all the aspects of Brexit, is you all speak with such certainty. You've just delivered an eloquent vision of what you think will happen, but why should anyone believe you over the Bank of England governor? And that is the difficulty at the moment. There are so many potential scenarios because we are quite in an unprecedented area. Why should we believe you?
Well, there are lots of other different forecasters that forecast that on a World Trade Organization scenario with the change that I'm talking about would actually see a higher level of growth in the UK. So my problem is I'm not telling them I can see the future, unlike the Governor of the Bank of England, unlike the Treasury. I don't say that it absolutely is set. What I say is, and this has always been the case in my view, the British public will make their own future. So, financial forecasters do not sell things. They do not produce stuff. What they do is they try and tell you how they think you will behave given a set of circumstances, the general public. And my view about that is almost every single time the British people have confounded the forecasters. And I'm convinced that will be the same again.
Just before you go, if you are saying, as you have done, that the people of Britain should pay no attention to whatsoever to what Mark Carney said, one could ask, what's the point of him doing it then, if his figures mean nothing? Do you think that the speech today has been some way politically motivated?
No, there's a lot of stuff in there which they can pay plenty of attention to, which is he's talking about potential problems, things that might exist, things that people can do to offset that. All of that it's quite reasonable to talk about if things were going in a direction, what would you do to change things? How would you react? What they can't do is forecast whether people react to those things in a particular way. All I'm saying is, by all means, pay attention to what they're saying in terms of what they think might happen in the event of other things changing. But the key element is, every time, and this was said by the head of the OBR, by the way, not by me, that's the independent body that does the forecasting for the government. He simply said, at the end of the day, pretty much every financial forecast is wrong because people don't always react dynamically in the way
So what you're saying...
It isn't necessarily the case, as the governor said himself today, that these will actually happen. He's saying, if nothing changes, these things could happen.
All right.
But he said they may not.
But do you acknowledge they could happen, or are you saying that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, things will improve dramatically?
Well, my view is that the forecasts that have forecast a high level of growth in terms of a World Trade Organization process, I think there's some merit in that. But again, I don't say that they're right. I simply say take a balance of both and recognize something, which is if we strike trade deals with other countries, these forecasts say they don't amount to very much. But all the trade deals that I've seen with regards to things like New Zealand, with China and all the other countries have all led to a very much higher level of growth, more than been forecast. So you can take your pick, really, but my general view is the British people make their own future, and how they react to change is invariably flexible. I'll leave you with one thought, which is the chief economist of Deutsche Bank, a German, said about 4 weeks ago that he thought the UK would do fine in any circumstances. Why? Because he said the UK, the British people, are arguably the most flexible people within Europe and possibly globally, and therefore they are bound to do well. Now that was not from a British politician. That was from someone who doesn't even earn a living in the UK.
We've got to leave it there. Ian Duncan Smith, thank you very much for your time.